generally I load all my ammunition when I go shooting. So I can't keep like, a home defense load of,
Damn it.
a Panzerfaust round loaded, ready to go for home defense. I
I
can do
mean, not
that
with that
legally.
That would be and I'm sure our sponsor, Attorneys for Freedom, would love to would love to get their hands on that case, but it would be wild to hear someone like, someone broke into the house. I got a family here, like babies in the house and stuff, and you know what? Like, it was the closest thing I had to hand. So
It was the first thing in the safe. I grabbed it.
yeah, I know it's fucked up. I know it doesn't look good, but I genuinely feared for my life, and that's just what I
Oh my
had.
God. At that point, though, I would immediately just be like going off my back porch, shooting some fireworks, and like trying to scrub all the fucking viscera before the police get in.
So, where's the body? Well, the legs are over there, and the rest of him I kind of lost.
Yeah. Oh no, I'm not calling the police. I
Tickle.
someone with an RPG in my house. I am remodeling the house, and they're going in the dumpster after I shovel them up and like mop them with paper towel.
A Flieger fucking what?
Never heard of it.
You're listening to the Art and More podcast with your hosts, Nathan and BR. Nathan is a Canadian illustrator with a couple years of military experience, and BR is a British anarchist that moved to the States. Both are passionate shooters and community builders. Together, they run the Seaburn art page. Enjoy the show.
Hey guys, welcome back to the Art and War podcast. I'm Nathan with my host BR. This is a very professional podcast. It did not take three attempts to get the proper introduction. BR is looking at me like you're a fucking idiot.
No, I'm looking at a black screen where your face should be, but please continue.
It should be. But today I'm feeling a little shy. You know, I need to not have the camera today. Today we have Jonathan Wild of the homemade How to Make Your Own. You can buy this on Amazon. I'm going to shill for you. How to make your own Panzerfaust in your garage, and also Fliegerfaust and several other rocket launchers that are in development. Signaling devices, sorry. Jonathan, I've been warned not to Fed post too hard. What is the highest level of like police vehicle armor that these things can penetrate?
Going straight to the deep end.
Oh my god.
Well, there's a Ordnance Lab is another YouTuber. There's an answer. I think they tested a 50 or to 60 millimeter shape charge, and I think it went a few inches. So I think like a 3D printed warhead, probably about 2 to 3 inches. Like if you have the required license to get that type of stuff, like Ordnance Lab, they have. But yeah, in theory, one of these RPG Panzerfaust style launchers could do.
Have you got a license for that?
I appreciate the actual answer. I just wanted to horrify BR. Like his faces
Well,
I'm
mean,
genuinely trolling the producer here.
like me as a private individual, I adore that question. Me
too.
as a host with a guest who has many piles of paperwork to do what he does is horrified.
All of us here with intact doors as of right now.
As of right now, as of the time of recording. But no, thank you so much, man, for joining us. Yeah,
they'll be there. Don't worry.
There's a slight delay to Langley, but
Yes.
no, Mr. Jonathan Wild of Wild Arms Research and Development. I've been meaning to have you on for a long time. I was just discussing with you before the show. On my first podcast where I cut my teeth, the E-Militia podcast, my co-host brought you on like a long time ago, like 3 or 4 years. Oh
4
my
years,
god!
I think.
And yep, it was your first podcast, right?
Yeah, the first one I ever got invited on. I was really nervous. I was really like, I had everything prepared, like 10 tabs open.
And I'm sure it went swimmingly, but my co-hosts attempted to get me the file. Somehow it got lost, and the episode never came about, and I have felt like a piece of shit for years. So thank you so much for giving us... Yes, absolutely. You've been flying on your own steam. That's not a very good analogy. Flying on your own steam. There's no such thing as a... Anyway, you've been... Steam planes? No, let's not get into it. Anyway, no, you've been doing just fine on your own, so I'm glad we can finally bring you on the show and kind of poke and prod and ask questions about these things. Because I mean, I have just been seeing the 3D launcher topic get proliferated more and more with your various releases and your obviously the video content. And I mean, it is so enjoyable that we live in a time where on one end of the spectrum you have boomers on Twitter going like, something 3D printed can't handle like the recoil of a 9mm, and then you've
That'll
got
blow
you
your
over
hand
here
up.
like, yeah, yeah, you're over here like, well, actually, you can make rocket launchers at home.
I try to do that like once a week. I'll get tagged in like 10 posts that are just like that. Like, oh, that's gonna melt. That's gonna, that can
It's like,
happen. I'm like, I selectively choose, but I'm like, okay, today's the day.
Yeah,
This is
yeah,
the one where we throw up the obligatory rocket launcher post.
yeah. Like, oh, word. Get fucked, nerd. No,
yeah,
so
I was going to say, like, people are posting that on videos of you using it.
yeah, yeah. So getting back to the origins that you've been doing this for a few years now. Like, what makes a person get into the DIY launcher scene?
Yeah.
Yeah. Browsing a lot of ARFCom, Era15.com. Back in the day, like 20, now it's like back in the day, but 2019, till that point, I was just doing competition shooting, rifle classes, the standard arc for your average, gun enthusiast. And then I kind of liked weird and obscure guns, like
Hmm.
from the get go. Like if there's less of them made and it was terribly designed, I loved it. That was kind of my jam. But going from there, kind of like ran out of like cool stuff to kind of look into, and then I kind of got the idea from an ARFCOM post. Someone built a RPG 2, and it worked and stuff. So I reached out and I'm like, how do I do this? And this guy was he unfortunately has passed away now, but it was kind of like a small shop. He made barrel blanks
Hmm.
for like the RPG, and he's like, "Oh, I've got one for the Panzerfaust. It's just a tube, but it's like rated for the pressure, and it's
Yeah.
just a blank tube." And he's like, "Yeah, if you want to work on this, I'm gonna eventually get to this project, but I've got blanks made." So I bought one of those blanks. I filed a Form 1, which is you know the ATF paperwork to make a destructive device. That's a different category of weapon in the United States. So I built that, the Panzerfaust, and then kind of going off a lot of the data online. So there's a lot of old documentation with like how much powder they used, and then gathering reproduction parts and then modifying them to take pressure bearing parts, because you don't want to use the display tube that's probably going to explode. You need a pretty strong tube to take a quarter pound of explosive propellant
Yeah.
in the in the
Especially when it's
tube.
gonna be that close to your fucking head.
Yeah.
Yeah, we did like 4 or 5 shots on a foldable chair, and that became iconic in its own right. Of like, if you want to get into launchers, you have to like start shooting from a folding chair, and that seriously, there's a lot of people doing that in the development community as like a rite of passage. Fold out, office chair, ideally black. Tan is pretty good too.
Is there any like number one folding chair choices? Like, should we be going to Lowe's, Home Depot,
I,
Walmart?
for me, I like the ones with like the little padding on it. Like I don't like solid metal. I like it's metal, but it's got like a nice padding on it. Protects the
Yes.
launcher a little better.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
It's a project. Like you're putting your love and your blood, sweat, and tears into this thing.
yeah. So for my first one, it was, and I stole it from my wife. I was running around the house. I'm like, what the hell am I going to shoot
What?
this on? And then her family had a bunch of these folding chairs. I'm like, yep, snagging right there, snagging that right out of the garage. And then I think we had like ratchet straps. I think I used, and then electrical tape I used just to strap it in there.
I like also how you say this is kind of a rite of passage. Like, there's a large, I imagine there really is, but this is the first time I'm hearing of it, and it makes me really happy. A large community of people who just build fucking rocket launchers and then post videos, to the point where there's a stereotype of the taped to folding chair.
It's definitely a niche still, but since
Yeah.
I started, where obviously, I bought the singular tube from the guy and then used that to build my project. But outside of that, there's very few people that were doing it. 4 years later, we have a company, not my company, but another company selling RPG 2 like as like standard. Like you can buy
Mm.
it brand new. You can buy their ammunition. If you have a federal explosive license, they actually sell high explosive warheads.
Holy
I
shit.
mean, the development that's gone on in 4 years is crazy, and the community that's grown behind it is blown up. Like I never expected it, and I don't think I was. I may have influenced it, but I definitely wasn't like the one who created it. I don't want to take credit for that because a lot of people like probably got into it in their own way, but they could have been inspired by seeing me doing it and seeing it was possible. And that's how I got started. Is I saw someone else do it, and I was like, that's pretty cool. I'm gonna do that.
Yeah, like
Um,
talking about obscure and hard to come by weapons, and you're like, I think I'm gonna get a rocket launcher. Like
Yeah.
that's about maxing out into like unless you can get like an anti-aircraft gun or something crazy. Like there's not really much topping that.
yeah, and just going into that point, that's the only few weapons that's actually banned in the United States is a real man pad,
Oh,
specifically by law.
damn
So
it!
unfortunately you won't be seeing any Stinger missile from me. The violation for NFA, it's like 10 years in prison for that law. It's a specific, like, on its own law, it's 25 years in prison for that one. So I'm not going to gamble on that one, but that's an
Probably
interesting.
is.
But
I would
prior to
imagine.
9/11, you were able to technically legally get one.
What?
Yeah, it
As like
was
a
legal.
destructive before 9/11, would it have been like a destructive device deal
Yeah,
still?
yeah, it
Holy
would have been
fuck.
the same. There was no rule, and I think after that, that world changing event, they're kind of like, nope, we don't want that anything related to a plane. But yeah, I didn't see any other because I do a lot of research into the
Yeah.
laws themselves to make
Yeah,
sure I'm
yeah.
above
I
board.
imagine you'd have to, so you don't. Your
Yeah,
doors are intact.
with like JStark and similar like kind of underground developers, there's so much OPSEC that's required
Yeah.
to even give yourself a chance. And even with, unfortunately, his situation, he got found out eventually. I'm doing, my face is available, it's
Yeah.
on the book, literally my
Yeah.
name,
You
that's
publish
my real
multiple books
name.
now.
It's not a pen name or like a
Hmm.
nickname. I've got to make sure I'm doing everything above board because if I do something wrong, someone will kick in my door. So,
Yeah.
Yeah.
uh, 'cause they know where I am. They have my
Oh,
updated
I
address.
imagine.
They may be on the call. We don't know.
Yeah,
Yeah. Oh, 100%.
That's why Nathan turned off his camera.
Ah,
It's like
It's like
click.
yeah, this is one of those episodes where we probably have a live audience.
there is no, federal agents in my room, sirs.
They're in your walls.
In my
Um,
no, they've always been in my walls. That's why I need to build a Panzerfaust. I mean, for legal reasons, this is a joke.
Nathan, they're under your skin. Claw at them.
Get it
No,
out. Get him out.
no. On that though, like with all of the hoops you have to jump through and stuff, like to make one launcher as like a hobby side project and filing a Form 1 is one thing, but to kind of like dedicate the time and resources that you do to this, like what's kind of the mission of Wild Arms Research and Development?
Yeah. So, we tend not to be as spicy as some of the other developers in the gun CAD movement, but
Yeah.
I would say there's kind of two or three like kind of objectives. It's kind of like we want to research the history of like obscure weapons because I do like a random weird weapon that probably wasn't effective, but it's kind of cool.
Mm.
And then another part is like pushing the limits of manufacturing methods. So I do this on a shoestring budget. A lot of big gun tubers, like, they'll make like 10-20 grand on a video. We make that in a year, and we usually spend that entire amount of money in development of just making things extremely
Goes
low
right back
budget.
into it.
Yeah, but extremely low manufacturing budget. A lot of things are donated by companies. Like, they'll donate their time and machining an item for us, or they'll have, like, with the M202 Flash that we can talk about later.
That thing is so fucking cool. Commando. You ever
Thank
see
yeah,
Commando, BR?
the
Yes. Yeah.
Arnold with the, and
Oh yeah.
I tried to
Oh
do that
yeah.
on the
The
book
big four
photos with, like,
barrel.
yeah, so we like obscure, rocket launchers, and we like to push the limits, and a lot of people, and with the M202, someone donated an M20 bazooka sight, and they're very rare to find,
Mm.
and someone donated just so we could have a more complete launcher with the right look. With it had the rubber eye cup that the original had. I couldn't find it, and he's like, I found it for sale, I'm sending it to you. I'd never met the
That's
guy.
cool.
He's so nice, and I'm like, I sent him a copy of the book. I offered to pay, and he's like, no, I wanted to see you do it, and that's how we operate. It's
Yeah.
mostly the generosity of the community. Without the community, I would have been on, like, the Panzerfaust would have been it.
Yeah.
And then
That's
I
awesome.
worked for an FFL, and he had a few machines. He helped out with a few machining stuff that I couldn't do with a Dremel or a lathe on, like, a drill press or something like that. So going back, it's researching cool weapons that you probably haven't heard of, pushing the limits of manufacturing technologies on a budget, and then kind of pushing the limits of what the Second Amendment is, at least
Yeah.
in the United States. So I think the actual mindset has changed from back in the day. It was like, oh, a shotgun, a pistol, maybe like a Mini 14 was like
Yeah.
the limits of the Constitution. In the general FUD mind, and I think that's drastically changed to where the common gun owner is like, no, an AR-15 is within the scope of the Second Amendment, and
It's a
this is
good
kind of
start.
like, yeah, and kind of my personal philosophy is like, okay, well, where is that line that the kind of consciousness of the American public, where is that line, and kind of pushing that to, like, oh, well, this larger firearm with a slightly larger bore that can deliver a payload, that can possibly be a Second Amendment covered item. And if I had bigger budget, I would definitely take the time in fighting these in court. There's a lot of,
Yeah.
with the Bruin Supreme Court case, I'm sure you guys saw,
Oh,
kind
yeah.
of gave a lot more credibility to the argument. There was no texter tradition basically covering destructive devices in the NFA. There's no historical law that would back prohibiting firearms over half an inch.
Hmm.
Like and that's what a destructive device is in the NFA. It's any firearm over half an inch, and that actually includes shotguns too. But they got lucky with a sporting exemption. But if it wasn't for that, a 12 gauge would be the same as a hand grenade,
Yeah.
legally speaking.
I remember when Canada accidentally banned shotguns during the 2020 assault weapon ban.
Oh fuck! Wait, go back. Those are the ones that we quote unquote like.
Yeah, no, they just
let
kind
the
of banned
peasants
them.
have their sticks.
If they have a removable choke on paper, they're banned, but they just don't enforce it. I guess they're like, oh no, we didn't do it. That's misinformation, because they'd have to alter everything. So yeah, that happened.
Shotguns are a funny one. Like one of my favorite pieces of stupid firearm legislation history is, like, if you're familiar with the anarchist bombings that happened or quote unquote anarchist bombings that happened in New York in the early 1900s, because of those happening in the United States, that's how a shotgun license got introduced in the United Kingdom. Like they were like,
Really?
"Oh, yeah. Things are spicing up. Take the peasants' shotguns, make them file to have a license for shotguns because anarchists are bombing New York?" Question mark.
That's kind of like I don't know how it was in 1900, but a lot of the world follows American current events. Like our biggest gun control pushes in Canada Well, I'm no longer there, so I don't give a fuck. But the biggest gun control pushes were after America had a mass shooting, and there was a call for American gun control. I
Yeah.
imagine, in 1900 it was probably kind of similar. Like
Well, I mean, it's
America's been the world superpower for a while.
yeah, and any what's the phrase? Like no good tragedy goes to waste, and
Exactly.
like that, you see that every single time. But like, what's really interesting on the topic of pushing the Second Amendment is like, is it really pushing it, or is it returning to what it was intended to be? Like you say, like there wasn't any mention of destructive devices because the expectation was that if you're for the revolution and you have a ship with cannons on it, well, hell, that is now like part of the revolution. We're going to put this privately owned ship to use fighting the Brits. And like whatever whatever terrible implements you had at the time, like, well, if you need them to defend yourself from the most powerful empire on the earth, well, by God, we're glad you have it, and please bring it along. And should this empire or tyrants, foreign or domestic, ever rear their ugly heads again, I hope you keep those awful implements around, so so we have the same firepower, if not better. And I'm sure you guys have both seen like all of the puckle guns and like all of the crazy stuff that was around when the Second Amendment was written. Like it's not like it was just muskets. Like they had
Yeah.
awful implements, and I'm sure the kind of things that you write about and develop
Yeah.
are not all that far off.
No,
Yeah.
during the Civil War or a little bit before that, I think in the 1800s, so it's a British gunsmith or engineer. He developed one of the first like metallic spin stabilized rocket launchers,
What?
and it was used throughout the. It's called the Hale Rocket. They had a few different variants, but if you look it up, it's imagine like a gyrojet, like the 60s, space rocket guns that shot, it was a kind of a bullet shape, but it spun when the rocket motor turned on. And it was just like that. And it was from the 1800s. It was
Oh wow.
commonly used throughout the war. And it was by a British developer. So rocket launchers have been around in the US, and it's even mentioned in the national anthem. So it has tradition.
You talk about what is it? Red Rockets, Glare?
Yep, that's
Huh.
what they're referring to. Is a lot of the rockets used during the Revolutionary War and even before that. Sometime it was 1840s, I believe, when they started getting developed. And there were previous generations of rockets, but they're more of like what we think of like fireworks, like a long stick and a big motor. This was
Yeah.
like the first one that's like a dedicated. Okay, we're using a rocket motor in a metallic case with an explosive warhead, not like a shape charge, but just like it blows up on impact. And we're gonna spin stabilize it with angled nozzles, which is pretty
Wild.
revolutionary for the time. But yeah,
Yeah.
thinking about it, we've had rockets that've been perfectly available to people for almost 200 years.
Yeah.
So it is Texan tradition, and that's what a lot of people don't realize. And then it's like every time you're at a sports game and you hear the national anthem, you know,
You're singing about rocket launches
yeah,
in part.
literally, yeah,
That is wild. This Hale rocket launcher, that was like anti-personnel mainly.
yeah. It was kind of like a way of basically the same role as like a cannon, but you could fire over greater distances, I believe, and you could fire them in a more lightweight package. So,
Huh.
you didn't have to carry those big long guns. The only thing is they got replaced by, rifled cannons because they were more accurate.
Mm.
But, rocket development would kind of take back off during World War II with the American bazooka. That's kind of when it reemerged as like a common item used. But it was used in prototypes and like experimental stuff before that. But that was like, okay, rocket launchers are like the next best thing for taking out anti armor.
Huh. That is crazy. I did not expect to learn about rocket launchers from the 1800s today, but
Yeah.
hey ho. No,
Well,
that's
that's what we're here for.
yeah, no, absolutely. Like
I didn't know that till like last year is when I'm like, I digged into the history a little bit, but I didn't quite understand the importance of that design on future rocket designs.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
Yeah, like
So
things of that nature is like a big part of my focus with gun rights is trying to help people realize just how neutered like modern gun rights are. Like when your hill to die on is a semi-automatic rifle, like buddy, that is like such low-hanging fruit compared to what has really been robbed of the American populace to be like autonomous and free people if you really believe in what the Second Amendment's about, which is, keeping a boot off your neck. Like you always get the creepy clapbacks of like, well, the government's got F-15s and nukes, and it's like, buddy, like we should have access to every terrible implement that would counter those things, like man pads and rocket launchers and all the rest of it. Like
Everything, yeah.
whether it's an enemy, foreign or domestic, like those, I unironically
Private
believe,
navies.
yeah, yeah, all of that stuff should be available to the everyman, like unashamedly, and with no caveats. Like those belong to free people. Full stop.
I agree entirely. Have you seen Reacher, like the second season of Reacher?
Mm-mm.
Oh, I just thought it was a little relevant and funny, but I do agree.
what happens in the second season of Reacher?
yeah,
Okay,
you can't leave
spoiler
us
alert,
off there.
Spoiler alert, TM. If you don't want to spoil Reacher, just fast forward on 30 seconds. They want to keep, well, in this case, TV show, bad guy terrorists, but essentially they have a more perfected javelin that can take down planes more, and they are, some of them have leaked into, like a bunch of them were stolen from a defense contractor and they were being sold somewhere, and you can't let those get into the hands of just anyone. It has to be in the hands of the military industrial complex. So yeah, Reacher season 2.
Interesting. I do know a second movie that kind of touched on the topic of that, and I guess that's kind of been the boogeyman with kind of Hollywood. But there's a movie. It's the Devil's Own, and it's
Yeah.
about the IRA trying to smuggle in Stinger missiles to Ireland. And that's kind of like the overarching, but it's got a bunch of like interpersonal drama and action. But that's the background plot of like the story. And just in the topic, they really did try to get Stingers in Ireland, and I believe they got a few.
Based.
Yeah, but that's what scares governments, and I think we talked before the show, or maybe during the show, that Stinger missiles are illegal in the U.S. One of the few weapons, and it was banned after 2001 and that whole incident. But before then, it was technically legal to own one. If you could file a Form 1 and you had enough money to make it, technically you could own one.
Yeah.
These are the things they've taken from us, gentlemen. You could have owned a man pad, just like you could have owned property if you had money in 2009. The time to invest was then. You all missed it. We all missed it.
We are kind of related, but I love this. I fucking love this. I imagine, Jonathan, you're a follower of Foscat.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
Have you seen the minigun, the 3D printed minigun?
The Nopal 5.56 minigun.
I
think
I think it was called the M1337. Last I looked.
Yeah,
Like,
I mean
instead of
the developer, his name is I believe Nopal. I'm sorry if I'm saying his name wrong, but yeah,
It's
I've
okay. I
seen
didn't
that.
even know his name, so I appreciate you bringing that.
Yeah, I follow it pretty closely with the 3D, the 2A 3D community, where it's like printed guns, printed FGC9, and yeah, that is one of my favorite non-rocket launcher builds, and it's awesome. The level of work that guy did, like the complexity is like nothing I do can compete with that one. So you should definitely get that guy on your show.
That's actually a good idea. BR, have you seen this? It's incredible. It's
I
It's
I can't get the suppressed minigun from Shot Show out of my head, so that's all I can think of. I don't think I've seen
well,
it.
Imagine this.
good thing you can the FTN.3 suppressor plus this thing. Sorry, Jonathan, go on.
No, I was gonna say, just imagine a 3D printed like a minigun with like 6 AR-15 barrels. Most of the components are printed, modified bolt carriers. It's got a hand crank, and it's in the shape of a minigun.
Holy fuck.
And it fires out of each one of the 6 barrels. And,
Oh
it,
my
and it
It's
only
God.
illegal
cost them
because
like
it's a crank.
$1,000. I mean,
Sub
you could do full auto.
$1,000.
Yeah, it was
I
cheap.
want this thing for the back of my fucking Prius. I am not
The
joking.
future is now.
Yeah.
The
It's like the
developer-
next time someone's like tailgating me with their high beams on, just pop the trunk.
Yeah.
I
Pop
sent
it
it
out.
to our group chat, but yes,
Good.
But yeah, he
released,
said.
yeah.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
It's in beta, so if you help with data collection and whatnot, you can join it. BR, I helped set up your Ender 3. You could have this next week. Cut that out. I see the look of panic in your eyes. Cut that out. Cut that out.
I don't own an Ender 3, Nathan. No. Oh damn, that thing looks pretty legit.
Yeah.
The guy said the most expensive part was the barrels. And then you
Yeah.
need to buy like a custom made ball bearing. But other than that, everything else is relatively cheap printed parts. PLA plus.
Just grab 6 Blem barrels from a fucking PSA daily deal. You're laughing.
I mean, it's compared to the real one, which I'm sure is like 10 grand, if you wanted to like buy one, if they'd even sell you one, a semi-auto one, which ain't going to happen.
Yeah.
But, this is the closest you're going to get to a minigun if you're not a part of the cartel or not a part of, what's it like, a machine gun dealer who has connections to get the components to build one. So yeah, this is the poor man's minigun, and it's definitely one of my favorite builds.
Yeah.
So yeah, you should have him on. I recommend.
I think
he doesn't get enough credit that he deserves.
I actually think that'd be a great idea. It's been a while since we've had a 3D printed guest. You'd be the closest person because like you're in the Voss community. Since I think we had Ivan on, and PSR is a recurring guest.
Yeah. No, aside from we need to give those.
I love
boys some
both
more
of them
love.
guys.
Yeah. He's genuinely one of my favorite people.
We are here with a quick word from our sponsors, Attorneys for Freedom, and some all-new additional benefits they've added to their Attorneys on Retainer program. If you're like 90% of our listenership and live stateside in the US, and listen to this show, chances are you carry a gun. If you do, you should consider the legal implications of carrying and using that gun for self-defense. Nathan and I use Attorneys for Freedom to give us peace of mind. Attorneys for Freedom offer a drastically different setup to most run-of-the-mill concealed carry insurance programs. Attorneys for Freedom specialize in real criminal defense, providing experienced attorneys on retainer for self-defense cases across all 50 states. Attorneys for Freedom's coverage is extensive, handling scenarios often overlooked by others, such as defensive display of a firearm, self-defense from home intrusion, protection against imminent threats of serious bodily injury or death, and civil lawsuits from attackers or their families, as well as self-defense scenarios such as using while in gun-free zones or sensitive areas, while under the influence or on medication, when you knew your attacker, or while using any weapon in self-defense, from a firearm to household objects or otherwise. But there's more. With Attorneys for Freedom, you're assured of steadfast support without the fear of being dropped or facing payback demands, even in police situations. They're ready to cover 100% of your attorney fees if they can argue self-defense and serious felony charges. Nathan and I have already joined, and it's a breeze for you to do so too. The National Self-Protection Plan kicks off with a $100 one-time fee and just $35 a month thereafter. Opt for family or annual plans for even greater value. Signing up through the link in our show notes or the CBO in our Instagram bio not only supports our show, but also secures you an arsenal of additional benefits. Up to $1,000 towards firearm replacement if confiscated, up to 10 mental health counseling sessions capped at $1,500, legal representation for non-self-defense matters at 35% off attorney rates, and many more incredible benefits detailed via the link in the show notes or at attorneysonretainer.us/artandwar. Ensure you're covered in every state and ready for anything with Attorneys for Freedom. Support the show and gain peace of mind knowing you have the best in legal defense on your side. Thanks for listening.
How's it going, lads and ladies? BR here with a quick word from the longest running sponsor of the Art and War podcast, Advanced Warfighting Solutions. AWS have been making tough as hell gear for decades right here in the US in North Carolina. Nathan, myself, and thousands of others run that gear through the ringer and trust our lives to it, whether that's LARPing in the woods or dragging kit through war zones. AWS manufactures many great packs, pouches, plate carriers, and our personal favorite, the SMU Operator Belt. A set and forget gun belt that crushes in build quality, capability, and excellent feedback from its many users.
We are tough on our gear here at Art and War, and the SMU takes that treatment in its stride. Though already at a sweet price point, you can knock $10 more off your SMU belt with the code ARTandWar10 at awsin.com. The code and link to the AWS website can be found in the show description. Thanks for listening, now let's get back to the show. That's the really cool thing about the FostCAD community is like, I pay much more attention to the innovations the 3D printer community is working on than the arms industry because it's far more fucking relevant to the everyman. What like just the principle of like, I don't care where on this planet you live or what kind of resources you have, I want you to be able to build X thing. Like, you know, a dear friend JStark, RIP, like his stuff is being used actively in Myanmar and other places to fight off like actual tyrants. And
Yeah.
you can't really say that about Daniel Defense. You know, like it's just not the same one-to-one of like, hey, an American arms company made something and now it's being used to genuinely fight for freedom on the other side of the planet by people who were like building very Pierre Luti style guns, like scrap guns, and so that stuff was impressive of itself. But once they got the capability to mass produce those things, like that changed the game for a lot of them, I'm sure. Like able to have replicatable manufacturing of like a semi-auto firearm instead of just like garage guns that, hey, it'll work until I can steal something off a fallen junta soldier. But
Yeah, the
that's exciting stuff.
development there is quite. I've got a friend there who kind of gives me he. I don't know. I don't think he's officially affiliated with the rebel groups, but he kind of keeps his finger on the pulse of a lot of their developments. And he'll send me their like news updates, and like they've got homemade like RPG-7s, their own domestic, and like they're making these in like third world conditions, an active war zone. They may have like a 100-year-old lathe that they're doing the stuff on, but they're making it happen. And they have been printing FGC knives, and they've also been like making cast submachine guns. So they'll like sand cast, so they'll like put the imprint in sand, they'll close it off, and then they'll pour metal, and they'll make a receiver with this like very old casting method. But their ingenuity is off the charts. They're one of the most interesting countries to look at for arms development. Way more interesting than, like you say, Daniel Defense. It's like, well, didn't they make like they remade the Hudson 5 or something?
I wasn't trying to specifically go after Daniel Defense, but no, it's a completely fair point. Yeah, the not a Hudson, I think you mean the H9, completely
It's like, I don't
rebuilt.
care about that.
No, like with love, I'm sure it's a fun gun, but like it's not changing the fucking world the way like something a European designed and R&D'd like illegally and on the run is changing, like doing its part to change the future of a country and a people. Like that's fucking wild. The H9 and nothing else that we saw at SHOT Show is going to do that. Like,
Yeah.
sorry, that's the truth of it. Like, not to shit on anyone too hard, but like I am so much less impressed with what you can build on like a state-of-the-art CNC machine and like a master's in engineering and all the CAD experience you could stomach. But like compared to what someone can build with like very primitive methods on the other side of the world to genuinely fight for their freedoms, like that is, and a lot of this a lot of your launches seem to be of that same sort of like, obviously there's a much more sophisticated way to manufacture these, but a lot of the World War II launches seem to have kind of their roots in the rapid manufacturing that was needed at the time. Like they need to be somewhat field expedient. Like the factory might get bombed. These need to be like relatively shit simple to pump out so they can just get to the front lines. Like, is that true of like most of the designs you work with?
Yeah, so kind of the same thing. I wish I had a state of the art CNC machine and like world class. Then I could build a whole lot cooler stuff. But
Oh, yeah.
minimal budget, minimal tools. Just kind of relying on the good nature of people that want to see cool stuff built. You know, it's kind of very reminiscent of how the Panzerfaust and the Fliegerfaust were made. Like you said, these were made at the end of the war when Germany was being bombed, like on the daily. And they're made in factories. So like with the Fliegerfaust, and what that is, if you're not familiar with the audience, if it's not familiar, it's a 9-barreled rocket launcher that shoots 20 millimeter rockets about 7 to 8 inches long. They carry like a little explosive charge in the front of the warhead. And what they were used for was taking down Allied aircraft that were flying low, going for a strafing run, maybe taking out trains or bunkers or something like that. It was to give them a chance of fighting back, because a lot of like the heavy Bofors 40 millimeter guns or flak guns, by the end of the war, they're getting depleted, and their ability to make them was getting rapidly taken out. Like they were
And
they
move them,
were
I'm sure, too.
exactly. Now, necessarily at the time, they weren't developed enough to really know if they were going to be effective. But I think what it would have done, and I think other people have brought this up before I did, but it was a morale booster. Imagine you're a frontline soldier. You used to be fighting in a different country. Now you got pushed back. You're in your own country. It's not looking good for you, and now you've lost air superiority, and you're just getting bombed every day. Well, now they hand you a weapon. They're like, "Hey, go to town on them," and it probably didn't work. But if you had 100 of these Fliegerfausts firing at an aircraft, I mean, one, you would have boosted morale, and maybe you would have got lucky eventually and hit one, because they were supposed to be used in mass number.
Mm.
Um, and, and,
Well,
and Go ahead.
I was gonna say, like, are there any historical confirmed kills against aircraft?
For this one, for the Fliegerfaust, they sent. So they ordered 10,000 of them with like, I think, don't quote me, but 2 million rounds of ammunition.
Mm.
That never got built. That was what was ordered, near the end of the war. And I think there was a couple hundred sent to South Germany for combat trials, and nothing survived in paper, from that test. So we
Mm.
don't know if it really hit anything. There was another complementary design made. It was the HS-297, I want to believe, and it was a scaled up version of the Fliegerfaust. Instead of 9 20 millimeter rockets, it shot 35 70 millimeter rockets, or
Hmm.
73 millimeter. Same concept. It's a volley fired rocket, and that, I don't think there were combat reports in that, but I believe it was used right at the end of the war for naval defense, like defending ports against aircraft, as well as it likely got used as ground targets, like firing indirectly and then hitting ground targets. That, I believe, that was used at the end of the war, but it wasn't Germany who developed the concept of mass firing rockets. That actually goes to the British. One for us. Uh,
Hey.
when England was getting bombed by Germany, we didn't have great supply of Bofors guns, because a lot of our equipment got lost in France. So they had what's called as a Z battery, and that was the same thing. It was shooting I think, 2 to 3 inch diameter rockets in mass numbers to defend England. I don't know if it got any kills. Like I haven't seen a confirmed report or anything like that. But the British kind of took that up. The Home Guard used that,
I
trained
was
on that.
I was gonna say, like, were they just proliferate amongst, Dad's army?
Pretty much, yeah. They would have Z batteries, and there's some photos of them firing it, and just think of thousands of rockets going into the sky. And that was kind of, you know, gunpowder is limited. The steel to make these really complex, barrels and flak guns, and you know we can make rockets cheap, and they don't have to be accurate if we shoot enough of them in the sky. And that was the idea. Um, so the English kind of, I'm going to give them the credit for developing, like,
Volley fire
volley
rockets?
fire rockets for anti-aircraft role. But really was Germany who's like, oh, we can put this in a portable launcher.
Oh,
They kind of
so
took
the
that.
British wasn't portable?
No, it was a big like launcher. Like the rockets are way bigger. You weren't holding this, but
Oh,
they were
okay.
like they had like this big blast shield. It was probably like 10 feet tall, like the whole mechanism.
Oh,
And
so it was like a emplacement rather than a
yeah, it was a
like
crew served
handheld.
weapon. So you had like three
Gotcha.
or four guys loading the rockets, aiming it, getting the rocket on board.
Yeah, well, there goes my hope of it being of people discovering one of these in a fucking barn somewhere. I
I mean, never say never.
no.
You have a story though. So before the 9-barrel version came out, there is a 4-barrel version that was made like the Panzerfaust. It had 4 barrels that were all connected with a Panzerfaust style trigger, and when you pushed it, it would send the first barrel, fire the first one, and it would chain fire the rest of them. That was found in a barn, I believe, somewhere in Europe. And that's now in the UK. A collector, a famous British collector, now has that. And yeah, he has one of the only surviving in very good condition man pads, and it was found in a barn or found in some kind of old warehouse, behind a wall or something. But it's very rare.
I love that
That's
stuff.
super neat. Kind of reminds me of sorry, VR. My mind jumps to. I see your face.
I take the piss at you for this. That's your transition. You stick with you
It's
do you,
not even
brother.
a transition. It's just a random ADHD thought. I had friends in Canada who would like they drive out to the middle of nowhere and they talk to old dudes and they'd try and find what weird and cool antiques were just in basements or fishing boxes or things like that. Usually they're on the hunt for like old vintage Rolexes or something like that, like back when these watches were really cheap and everyone had them. But sometimes like they'd find a 38 special or a fully automatic. God, what was that 303 like top loading machine gun?
The
I
Bren.
can't remember. I think it was a Bren. Yeah, it was a Bren. Yeah,
Oh,
all sorts
man.
of stuff.
Fuck a
Just
bar. I would take a
yeah.
Bren.
I take a Bren, but fuck getting 303 British in fucking 2000, the year of our Lord 2024.
You imagine getting vibe checked by a fucking full auto Bren with 303. The fuck did they hit me with?
Oh,
The
man.
last box of 303 I ever got, I had an Enfield. Every round was a hang fire, so it'd be a very slow moving machine gun. It'd be like bang, bang, bang. If you loaded that to a Bren, no one would convince it. It would be convinced it was a machine gun. It would be so slow hang fire in those rounds.
Was it surplus ammunition?
Oh yeah. It was dirt. It was cheap ammo that it came with the gun. Yeah, it didn't work. It's still using cordite, which is like the old fashioned gunpowder of the time. Instead of
Yeah.
powder, it was sticks of gunpowder, but it didn't hold. It didn't last for very long. Like yeah, that was scary firing it. You like click the trigger. It's like a musket. You wait a second, and bang.
See that's how you got into all this rocket launcher stuff. You're like, well, fuck it. I've already shot surplus 303 ammo. Like, let's go bigger. I really hate having fingers in a face.
Yeah, the Bren has eluded me. I have not fired that yet. That is on the list one day.
I mean, have you ever heard of one that's like operational and available to shoot anywhere? Because I haven't.
When I got into when I first learned you could own a machine gun, there were people that had like talks of people, someone with a Bren, like either a post sample or like a pre-registered one or whatever you call them. A transferable. That's what it is.
Because they were like the Brits and Canadians use them, so it'd probably be like Canadian surplus, right?
Yeah, a lot of stuff came across that border.
Yeah,
that do not have import marks back in the day.
Bless. People doing the Lord's work back in the day. I'm just gonna come down and show my buddy in Michigan what this thing can do.
I was a big Enfield collector, and that's how a lot of Enfields got into. I don't ironically, I only have like 2 or 3 guns now, like regular, guns. But I used to get into like collecting Enfields, and that was the one thing. It was like, yeah, none of these have import marks, and then you look up their history. It's like, oh, this was made in Canada.
This
They
was
Yeah.
never
walked
meant
over
to
the.
be here. I love that.
Uh,
No, I still need to get an Enfield myself. I want to.
You should get that L85, like
I
the
I am
BRN.
going to. Have you seen that? The what was it? Is it fuck? It's
I am a
L-
sucker
A-
for L85s. I tried so hard. I did have a bunch of parts for an L85.
oh
Like
really?
I had the pistol grip, the hand guards, the buttstock, the charging handle. I collected a bunch of them because I could never find the whole. Obviously you're not going to get a receiver, but you could have one machined, or now you could 3D print one.
Yeah.
But yeah,
So oh,
there was a bunch of them that got in the country. But I think I know what you're talking
really?
about. A customer, yeah, in the '80s, I think there was maybe between 1 and 50 of them got in the country, semi-auto and full
Gosh,
auto.
what the fuck?
They're very rare though.
Do you
I
know?
know.
Do you have any idea of the history of why they got here? Because I mean,
Yeah,
there's no way the Americans were considering stealing
no,
them, were they?
they were going to be consumer market back when the
Oh,
UK was kind of cool,
yeah,
but they
yeah.
they shut that down real quick.
What the fuck?
Now,
Um,
side note though, I think it's a Brazilian or Colombian gangster who got one, who shows it off, and I'm just like, you bastard! I really want that.
yeah,
But yeah,
you know the guy like appreciates only like a fraction of what we would.
yeah, and then that was because they kind of got stingent on who they would give these guns to. And Bolivia, their government got it, and then a couple Caribbean islands got it too.
Some
Because I was
Commonwealth
kind of,
connections.
yeah, that it probably got taken out of the inventory in Bolivia,
Yeah,
and now it's in Brazil, and a famous Instagram gangster now has it, and I'm very jealous.
Yeah.
I need to find this guy. But the civilian legal there's like a basically an AR what is it?
AR
Um
180.
Yep, AR-180 kit. So it's Ali and Kaufman LLC on Instagram, ALY and KAUF man LLC. But they make a lower for it, so you can build like effectively like I mean that looks pretty close to the real thing. And then depending on what barrel length you want to
It
do and
probably works
how
better.
oh, I'm sure it does. You can make like a real Gucci one, or you can make like a much more like authentic looking SAE. And I'm like, fuck! I've been saying for years, like if someone brings them over here, I will fucking buy one. And now that they have these lowers, I'm like, well, I
Uh,
guess I'm building an AR-180, and
It's
it'll probably run a fuck ton better than the real thing.
I was about to say it's like you can get an L85 without all the problems of the L85.
Yeah, yeah. I want to
You can
see
get
if
an
my
L85
skills
that
and
actually
drills have held
works.
up.
You don't have to send it
Yes.
to HK to fix.
Dude, it's so funny. Like, the last few years, whenever I've handled a bullpup, I grab it and I'm like, oh, I'm so American now. Because I grab it and I'm like, what the fuck is going on here? Like, the armpit reload is so foreign to me. But
Yeah.
that's something I wanted to touch on a little bit with you, Jonathan. Was you are of British origin, despite people perhaps not guessing that from how you sound.
Yeah, I've definitely Americanized, but yeah, I am a dual British American citizen. I got naturalized. I think that's what it's called
I was
back in
expecting an
2000.
accent. I don't know why.
Yeah, yeah. I came here when I was like 10 or 11, and then I didn't like as a kid. I didn't like to stand out. I didn't like that kind of attention. And if you speak British in middle school, best believe everyone is either going to tease you or love you. So, yeah, I Americanized pretty quickly. I wish I still had it, but no. My wife complains that she married a fake British person.
Yeah.
Well, mine started to get mangled over the last few years. I've been living with an American woman for 4 years now, going on 5, and it's the twang is coming in, and
Yeah.
it's funny. Like whenever I speak to Americans, like someone asked about my accent at a shot show and was like, "Are you German?" I was like, "That's a
Ah,
new one. That's a new
yeah.
one." I've gotten obviously English, Australian, German. Dutch, South African, like just because of the odd twangs, now it's a little bit transatlantic. And the other thing about being a Brit in America is like volume. Like Brits are and Europeans in general are like so much quieter. Like Americans don't know how to whisper, and I will state this as fact. Nathan, I don't know if Canadians can whisper. Have you noticed this?
I've never even heard of whispering. You're going to have to explain what that is.
I'm dead serious. Americans can't fucking whisper. They think that when they think they're whispering, they talk like this, and it's not whispering. It's still so fucking loud. Like they try and tell each other like a secret in a public setting, and like you'll distinctly hear someone like loudly whispering, and you're like, the fuck are they doing? Like I just know you're speaking about someone now, but I digress. Like all of that is really interesting to me. That because I mean I'm curious how you got into guns, having like British parents and having moved here. Like were they did your dad get into shooting after moving to the States, or like what did that look like for you?
Yeah. So before we came to the U.S., my parents were looking. I came over as a kid, so I didn't really have much say. But they were debating between Australia and the
Oh
U.S., and
no!
I'm
Oh,
very
God.
grateful that they went to the U.S. because I would have been kind of
Oh,
screwed. I always liked, I always wanted like an air rifle as a kid, and in England it's like a little trickier. I think I had like a BB gun. That was probably
but it's like somewhat popular, like
yeah.
especially if you're a country boy to have like a pellet gun. It's like somewhat common. It's nowhere near as common as like every boy in this country probably had a Red Ryder at some point, or a little Daisy or something. But like in England, you'll have like a little like break action pellet gun or something. Is like
Yeah, that's kind of what
pretty
I got
common.
started on. So one of my friends, he lived in the countryside. He had a little bit of farmland, and him and his dad like took me. They set up a ladder and stuff. They set out cans and stuff, and they were letting me shoot an air rifle, and I was just mind blown at the time because I always wanted one for myself, and my parents were kind of. We were three boys, like me and my brothers. We probably shouldn't have been trusted with one.
Someone would have got shot with a pellet at some point.
Yes,
Yeah.
that was my first time like shooting something. And then when I came to the US, a lot of times when you move to the US, you kind of stick around the people, like British people, like in my case. So like you kind of stay with the community until you really assimilate to American culture.
Yeah.
But there was a UK soldier who was living in the US, and it was family friends, and that's when he kind of told my parents like, "Oh, you can just go to a gun range and rent a gun." And I'm like, "Wait, you can own a gun?" And I kind of like look up at him, and I'm like, "Oh my god, they have guns!" Because I didn't realize, I was too young at the time to like understand like guns, like what it actually took to own one. I just saw them in the movies or this
Yeah,
and that.
yeah, and like where you're limited on having them and where you're not.
Yeah, so me and my dad, his first time really, I think he did like the territorial army training when he was younger. So he may have shot a gun then, but you know, it'd been years. So me and him go to a gun range. We're like learning how to shoot. I was probably 11, and my first gun was like or not my own gun, but like to fire was like a 22 revolver. And then every birthday I could get, I was like, let's go to the gun range. I want to
Yeah,
try
yeah.
something. Shot an M1 carbine. Shot like got into like your 9mm pistols, and like he thought it was kind of like we'll leave it out there. And as I got older, I don't think my parents are going to listen to this, but when I got 18, I'm like, okay, I want to buy a gun. They're like, no, you're not buying a gun. And I'm like, I'm buying a gun. And they weren't on board with it, but I would I when I turned 18, I went to this guy's house to buy a 20 gauge shotgun, bolt action. It had a broken magazine, so it was a single shotgun. And I snuck that in the house, and I was so like, "Oh my god, this is
I
like,
have a
I'm gonna
gun.
get." Yeah, I was so excited. I still have the photo of that gun. It was terrible. I didn't even shoot it, but it was like that first like, I'm now an adult. I've got my first gun, and then it escalated. So
Yeah, just a little bit.
and it was very tricky to get these stuff like in and out of the house because at the time I was still living with my parents. So I would put it in like the hamper and like just put clothes over it. This long 20-inch bolt action rifle shotgun. Yeah,
Jonathan, where are you going?
but it got so bad that yeah, I I, I think I had a Wasser AK, like the Romanian AK, and I had
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
And at that point, I'm like I kept asking, and they finally got around to the idea, and I'm like, I'm gonna do sport shooting. It's not just I kind of had to warm them up to the idea that it's not just like gangsters and crazy gun nuts or like rednecks with guns. It's like no,
Yeah.
you can be a normal person and get into guns. So while I was still living at home, pretty young, they came around to it. So then I got into the traditional. I want to buy every cool gun, and that's kind of how I started my arc into the gun shoot, firearms. So I did competitions. I would go to gun shows and that type of stuff, and then carry on from earlier. That's when I got into let's build the Panzerfaust, and I built the Panzerfaust, and I was always a big fan of P.A. Ludi, and I bought his book
Oh
years
yes.
before the Panzerfaust, and I'm like, no one makes books like this anymore. Paladin Press went out of business, but at the time they were still selling books, but
You are the only other
they
person to bring up Paladin Press on this show. I love that company so much. Sorry,
yeah.
have you ever read Man Trapping by Ragnar Benson?
Man
I,
trapping? I have
Man
no.
I
Trapping.
haven't heard
It
that
is
one.
exactly what it sounds like. It is about trapping men.
Is this like pre-iPhone Grinder or is it something cooler?
Oh, I was thinking more like Lethal
Man
Home
trapping.
Alone than Glory Holes.
Ah,
No,
okay.
this one's more about
I'm
like
less interested, but still on board.
Ragnar Benson. I remember my favorite Paladin Press book. Holy fuck! So when I got into this similarly to how you did, the first thing I did was get into Paladin Press, get into like reading all these funny little books with funny little things, and there's an
With
article
funny
in
little guys in them doing funny
funny
little
little things
activities.
just for educational purposes only. And like it was to the point where I'd just like download PDFs of them and put them on a little hard drive, just like, oh, this is my end of the world thing, and I'd read them ironically on flights, like whenever I was flying
That's the
somewhere.
best time to read these things. I read
Yeah,
what was it? Sedition and Sabotage, whatever the
sedition,
Scorpion.
subversion, and sabotage, which
Yeah.
surprisingly, I think you could have summed that entire book up with like, hey, stop paying taxes, be nice to people, and tell everyone else to stop paying taxes.
Yeah,
I
it's,
feel
it's
like
basically like quit being a bitch.
Yeah.
As a manual.
Yeah, I thought it'd be spicier, but I did enjoy it.
No, I always end up reading that one on planes because it's one of the PDFs on my phone. So I'm like, well, fuck it.
Yeah. But yes, there was an author for Paladin Press. Like they'd put out all the PA Ludi stuff, like Expedient Homemade Firearms was their series, and like Expedient Homemade Suppressors and all of that. But they also had an entire other series of very schizophrenic books written by a man whose pseudonym was Ragnar Benson. And I want to meet this man. If you know who this guy actually is, please get him to message us because I want him on the show and I also want to be his friend. Um, but he wrote one book called The Homemade Flamethrower or something like that, and it opens with a fictional scenario of you're on your compound and suddenly the FBI and the ATF or whoever are rolling up, and suddenly all the sprinklers go off and just coat them all with gasoline, and then you pop out of your like pre-entrenched fighting position and you dose them
Your
all with
spider hole.
your homemade flamethrower that uses like a lawnmower engine. It was the most schizophrenic book I've ever read in my entire life, but I couldn't stop. It was like I want to know what happened to this man. I hope he's still around just doing Ragnar Benson things. Okay, Jonathan, I'm sorry for the
No, you're good. No, I was gonna say, with Paladin Press, I mean, they were coming out with all these cool books, like how to make their version of C4 and Semtex, so really spicy books by today's standards. And then they made a book which was more of a novel rather than a guide, but it's like how to be a hitman. And yeah, someone used that in court, that they followed this book, and then they got sued, and they actually had, I think, the ACLU support them. in the trial, but unfortunately, I think they lost. And after
Oh,
that, the quality of books of like kind of coolness went down, and it went to more mall
Oh,
ninja, like how
they
to be a
lost their nerve and just went with like gun show special kind of books.
yeah,
yeah.
like mall ninja stuff, and it was really the quality went down. So since then, no one's really come out with and I wouldn't say my books are like the same DIY, but it's like in the same spirit in the sense that I'm showing what I'm doing, how to safely do it, the history. It's kind of like I'm taking kind of their ideas and putting repackaging it in a a
I
20
love that.
yeah, the 20s 2020 era you know repackaged formula, I guess. I'd say.
Yeah. For
You're
anyone curious about Paladin Press, most of their books are. I would never recommend book piracy, especially as you have a book. But a lot of the stuff is unobtainable now. But you can still find it in PDF format on Library Genesis. Look it up. Use a VPN or not. I don't care. Who cares?
I'm not your
Fine.
dad.
I'm not your dad.
No, like I think there's something very valuable in what you do and what a lot of those guys did, which is like
I agree.
document this stuff, and it's like in a world where it just takes one generation to burn all the books and have forbidden knowledge lost forever, like especially in the more and more sterilized internet era where like you can basically gaslight an entire generation into thinking something never existed if you wipe it from the internet, like genuinely. And it's like, no, this stuff was like physical media, like it existed, it was people printed this stuff and proliferated it, it's real, it's out there. And being able to have that stuff accessible to not only like proof of concept, but also to be like, no, this is not only doable, but it's reasonably low tech. Like a lot of the Pierre Luthi stuff, it's sort of without without being a like an actual hill to die on kind of last stand for rights. It's more just proliferation of like how accessible a lot of this stuff is. Like we're talking about the the people in Myanmar and all over the world doing a lot of these DIY like weapons building projects, is like this stuff is meant to come across as inaccessible and like just beyond our comprehension, when the technology is, as you've demonstrated, like not like monkey simple, but it's attainable by a determined everyman. And that, in a ever increasingly scary and uncertain world, is good to know. It's good to know that this stuff is not some far off alien technology. It's in fact like very real, and it was very proliferated not that long ago by people with probably less manufacturing capability, or yeah, people with much less manufacturing capability than the average man today.
Definitely. I would agree. I think with having things in books, and I've tried to kind of get more developers into the idea of doing books. Other than like just being able to monetize their work, which, it's a debated topic. It's like, you don't necessarily want to like gouge people, but, development costs money. So that's one
Yeah.
avenue that I've talked with other people about. It's like, if you want to fund more development in whatever field you're doing, books are a good way to do it, but it's a great way to preserve the knowledge. So you may not ever need this information, but having that in your library is a good resource to know. It's just knowledge. Thank God we most likely probably don't need to use it. I hope like that's the idea is that we never need to know this information, but it's good to know it, and it's good to have that resource that can't be deleted on the internet. It can't be taken out of your digital Kindle without you knowing. So books are they've been around thousands of years, and they're going to be with us for 1,000 more. So I think they're great resources for and it doesn't even have to be rocket launchers. It could be how to fully maintain your rifle, how to maintain your equipment long term. It could be gardening. A lot of this information you ideally want it for the worst outcome, but ideally you don't need to use it, but it's good to have it, and it's good to pass it on to future generations.
I was going to say is how a lot of this knowledge is also in its own way generational wealth. Like having a bookshelf stocked with, how to grow your own food, how to build your own weapons, how to purify water. Like it's wild to think, but increasingly so, like we're being made less and less or more and more reliant on centralized systems and such and centralized knowledge, and so the ability to be like, oh, I can just do that is becoming ever more valuable.
Honestly, it is very on message also for us. What like the proliferation of information and the idea that any information is just for a protected privileged few, usually the state. That is my least favorite thing. That is actually
That's
antithetical
such
to
a
everything I
Canadian way to
believe.
put it. That is my least favorite thing.
My least favorite
Of
thing.
all the things that exist in the universe, that is my least favorite.
It is my least favorite, and it's like when people, especially people who work for the state or anything, are like, you shouldn't put this information out, be it a blueprint or information on tactics or like um, God, you could have it from anything as simple as like how to clear a room or set up your own.
Hey, isn't this protected information, son? It's
Yeah,
gonna get people killed.
yeah. It's like shut the fuck up. I'm gonna
Tickle.
from a tree.
This is the spicy part after the 1 hour mark.
yeah. This is where we're getting off the rails.
Um, but yeah, no, shit pisses me off, and fuck those people.
And there's one resource or a couple of resources that I think people don't really understand that actually comes partly or kind of like is to do with the government is first patents. There is so much information and patents that have helped me with my projects that is public information. It's archived as long as the government lasts. It's going to be archived, right? And think about the most sophisticated weapon systems. There's probably a patent on it, and that patent, the whole point of a patent is like you have this monopoly on this particular item for 17 years, and then you, in exchange, you're going to tell us how to make that item in the patent, and that is, once that is expired, it's public knowledge. It's public for everyone to see. Well, most of these are from past 20 years ago. They're expired. So like the M202, that patent, M202 is a 4-barreled incendiary rocket launcher from the Vietnam era. That patent is expired. It's all the information, or a lot of it, how it was made, how it functions, is all publicly available. So you don't necessarily need my books to like understand how it works because the government has archived it for you. Not that I'm like a big government supporter, but that is one aspect that if anyone complains about my books, it's like the government has all that information on a handy dandy register.
Yeah.
That they that's the whole idea of doing patents is to they're gonna like, oh, you have this monopoly, and then after that period of time, it's now you've given that information of how to make it, and now it's available for everyone. So that's an underappreciated avenue of learning and researching, because I guarantee a lot of the old books were using patent information like formulas for C4 and stuff, came from those, and patent legal speak is annoying, but once you learn to read through the lines, you can get a ton of good information, and that's made our book possible, or a lot of our projects possible, is like digging through the patents. And then another one is Defense Technical Information Center, and you're talking tens of thousands of research papers on all type of weapons development is public information. Now they keep a lot of the good stuff to themselves, but their ballistic data, rocket formulas, how to manufacture advanced motor cases, because the rocket stuff I do, you start really getting into nitty gritty technical details, and all this information is already paid for on your dime. so you can access it through the DTIC.
Mm.
So that's another underappreciated. No one mentioned it to me. It's just like, oh, I'm researching all these old papers from the 80s. Well, they're all kept on this site that you've already paid for. So, um, yeah,
It's so weird how those catalogs exist, because it's like, who is this for?
well, it's for developing. It's for industry to use and use that
Mm.
information to research. But I do appreciate archive.org, I think it is, has ripped most of those information from that website. So if they ever like, oh no, this information can't be given to civilians, Archive has it. And then if you wish to download those, it's there before they get taken down. But yeah, those are just two majorly unappreciated sources of information that the average person can access for free.
Yeah, and that's
And
like,
you've already paid for it with your, if you pay taxes, that's good. If you paid your taxes, you've already paid for it. So yeah,
and if not, enjoy it anyway. It's a free
yeah.
country. Some things should be free, right? Something I wanted to get into was kind of the other end of this, which you were kind of getting into, which is the ammunition. Like, for your purposes, test firing these rocket launchers, obviously these aren't, I don't know, with your licensing or with your resources, like, do you ever do high explosive payloads, or is it just like essentially inner rockets?
Yeah, so there's three major designs that I've done. I did the Panzerfaust, that's not technically a rocket launcher, it's more of a recoilless gun. And then the
Mm.
Fliegerfaust was the 20 millimeter rockets, and that was rocket powered. And then the M202 is a 66 millimeter rocket. They've all been inert. Um, I don't have a license, and I don't require one. I just need to pay for the tax stamp. So I got to pay the tax man his $200, which was the price of a Tommy gun in the 30s.
Yep.
And once you've paid the crown their pence, you get an approval letter. But the way they've done it is if you use more than a quarter ounce of explosive, each round requires a explosive or a tax stamp. So every round is
That's
$200.
so gay.
Yeah,
That
and it
is
adds up
so gay.
quickly. and technically, if you do a Form 1 an HE explosive warhead, uh, and as long as you load it and fire it on site, and I'm not a lawyer, so don't. This is not legal
I'm
information.
sure this is where it gets a little bit messy, because
I'm
not
a lawyer,
everyone's
do whatever you
firing,
want.
not everyone's firing rocket launchers and explosive payloads. But sorry.
Yeah. So you should also, I mean, if you've seen the RPG-7 video from a few months back of that guy getting absolutely decimated by the RPG blowing up, I always recommend shooting remotely, ideally, unless in a wartime situation, it's worth risking that. But I've after seeing what happens when it goes wrong, we kind of went over to remote shooting. But that's
Well,
to a side
Well,
point.
a quick note on that. That was like a previously inert launcher that was reactivated, right?
Yeah, didn't
Yes.
welds fail or something?
Yeah, so what happened with that? And again, I've been passed down information from a few different people related to that situation, and from my estimate or my guess is it was a reactivated RPG-7, which is like when they import them in the country, they cut a caliber size hole into the launcher, so it'd be
Mm.
a 40 millimeter hole. But usually it's some drunken person, so it's not actually a hole most time. It's like a jagged,
Just
square out of
just
it.
fuck me up, dog.
Yeah, it's terrible. So like it's usually a reactivated, RPG, and they were using RPG-2 style ammunition, homemade. So it was like just black powder.
Oh man.
Oh,
Yeah,
so
but
we're getting like pissing hot loads.
yeah, well, here's the thing: the regular, booster charge is 4.5 ounces of black powder, separated in like chambers, and they have like each chamber has a flash hole, so it starts a chain reaction of, the ignition, and that delays the peak pressure, and it's usually about like 6 inches long. The propellant charge. Well, the one they fired was like double that length. So
Well,
they were.
6 inches is very debatable amongst men. We all know this.
Yeah.
It's a that's very big. But when you get a 12-inch booster charge, you see it in the video, but it's at least twice the length or
Oh,
double the length
fuck.
of. So you imagine loading a 50 BMG and putting double propellant. I mean, of course, it's gonna blow up,
A
or
50
like
BMG will already clean your sinuses, but you double the payload. Holy fuck.
or double the propellant charge. Yeah, it'll explode on you, and I think that's what happened. Is the RPG can handle RPG 2 rounds because it handles smokeless powder, which is considerably higher pressure. But any failure like clogging in the nozzle or any kind of like peak pressure that it couldn't handle, like maybe it ignited too fast. It was just a piston hot reload, and the only reason I believe they're alive is because it was demilled downward. So when you saw the RPG blow up, it normally it's the hole that they re-weld is pointing at the face.
Oh, hell yeah. Nice.
So he is lucky that it was pointed down, because if it was pointed this way, he would have died. I guarantee it.
Fuck.
He would have absolutely got his face blown off. And if he survived, I don't think his quality of life would have been good. But he's very fortunate. It blew down. He, if you've seen the video, launcher goes flying, he goes flying. That is the best possible outcome for him in that situation. So
Yeah.
it's debated of what really caused the explosion, but I've been firing the same style of ammunition, and anytime I fire it on the shoulder, I download the ammunition. So let's say I'm using like 5 ounces is like the standard. I'll go to like 3 because it's on my shoulder. It doesn't really matter that it's not full power round. It's I'd rather be more safe. But they went double the normal load, or it appears in the video they went double load, and that's what happens. People sometimes get and the fault isn't on the guy that got hurt. He's a really nice guy. He was under the impression he was with professionals, and he trusted them, and they fired that launcher dozens of times throughout several days, and it was the last shot of the last round of the day of the whole thing, and that's what got him. I made they have all the high speed cameras. They're interested in filming my rocketry. Obviously, remote tested. I don't think he ever wants.
Good luck getting that crew back to fire it from the shoulder.
Yeah, no, but I wouldn't agree to it either. But they're interested. So hopefully in the future they'll get some cool footage of actual rockets flying, because they're just shooting, black powder boosted projectiles.
Were they like blanks, or was there an actual like missile?
No, it wasn't rocket powered. So with a rocket, it burns outside the barrel. What they're doing is like a recoilless gun. So it's just, all the powder is burnt in the barrel, and then that's it. And then they did fire high explosive warheads. So if you've seen their follow up videos, they fired one at a torso, one at a brick wall, one at a car.
Oh yeah. I've seen the one where it like gets embedded and then blows up. Like, holy fuck.
Yeah. So they did test
Garen thumb fucking torsos.
Similar to that, yeah. The ballistic dummy with like all the bones and stuff. Yeah, it goes into the torso and it kind of like bends down, because I don't think they're using like homemade impact fuses. So there's a bit of a delay.
Yeah.
So it like goes in,
lurches, aims up just a tiny bit, and then boom, and oh my god,
just
horrifying.
Incinerated. Yeah, but those are really good footage. But that's all legal to do as civilians. Hopefully if you don't get bit, loading piston hot loads, you'll be fine. But I forgot what the main point was.
I was getting you into the ammunition and kind of like. So that was the big thing I was interested in, was like if every single round required a tac stand, which I imagine would be, basically just render your operation impossible.
Yeah, and then to use explosives commercially, that requires a license too, or that would be the thing that would require me to get a license, because right now I don't have a license. I'm just, building these as personal weapons, and then writing, like my company will write the book on, the history, and then like what I did. That's kind of how I've broken it up.
Yeah,
So
so the paperwork is literally like a Form 1 for a destructive device, and then you're basically in the clear, or is there any extra
yeah, pretty much.
licensing
As long
involved?
as I follow, like, I can't keep loaded ammunition. You've got to load it on site because the ammunition itself is an explosive, kind of, depending on the ammunition. There's exemptions for like black powder or like fixed ammunition, but I won't go too far in the weeds on that. But generally, I load all my ammunition when I go shooting. So I can't keep like a home defense load of
Damn it.
a Panzerfaust round loaded ready to go for home defense. I
I
couldn't do
mean, not
that
with that
legally.
attitude.
That would be and I'm sure our sponsor, Attorneys for Freedom, would love to would love to get their hands on that case, but it would be wild to hear someone like, someone broke into the house. I got a family here, like babies in the house and stuff, and you know what? Like, it was the closest thing I had to hand. So
It was the
it,
first thing in the safe. I grabbed it.
yeah, I know it's fucked up. I know it doesn't look good, but I genuinely feared for my life, and that's just what
Oh
I
my
had.
god! At that point, though, I would immediately just be like going off my back porch, shooting some fireworks, and like trying to scrub all the fucking viscera before the police get in.
So, where's the body? Well, the legs are over there, and the rest of him I kind of lost.
Yeah. Oh no, I'm not calling the police. I
Tickle.
someone with an RPG in my house. I am remodeling the house, and they're going in the dumpster after I shovel them up and like mop them with paper towel.
A Flieger fucking what?
Never heard of it.
Just say you used an 8 gauge, Jesus.
Yeah.
Oh.
But going to that point is, yeah, I'm not using high explosive or low explosive in the payload. But for my next project that I'm working on, so I've just redone making the first book. So I have 3 books on each weapon design. So I've remade the first book, and I'm hoping with that to help fund probably the most ambitious project that I'm working on, which is a hypervelocity rocket. It was a project from the 1970s to 1980s. It was conducted at Redstone Arsenal. And what it is, it's a 2-inch diameter rocket, about 42 inches long. It flies at 5,000 feet per second with a 1-pound tungsten penetrator. It can penetrate up to 4 inches. There's no explosive payload. It's just kinetic energy. So it's like shooting, like I think it's the equivalent of a 30 or 40 mil autocannon. Um, a tungsten dart. It's the same as that, but just you have a launch tube, you have your rocket, and it's there's no explosive payload, so there shouldn't be a tax stamp for it. So that's kind of one thing I'm working on right now. Is
So would it still
that.
be a Form 1 or?
Yeah, for the launcher, which I've
Okay.
already made the launcher.
Okay.
The launcher is ready to go. It's that big one on the tripod. I don't know if you've seen it. I can also shoot black powder rounds out of it. It's a 3-barreled launcher. One of the top barrel is made out of the same material as the Panzerfaust, so I can shoot cool, 3D printed, chalk rounds out of that, and it's pretty. People get it. I took that to a regular gun range and like on a public firing line, and yeah, I got all the FUDs kind of looking over their shoulder, like, "What the hell is he shooting?" So,
Son, is that legal?
Yeah, the owner, I'm gonna give them a shout out. Aries Training Facility. They were very kind enough to I asked them. That's where I shot the Panzerfaust 4 years ago on a private range, but they're like, "Oh, it's booked up." And I was like, "Can I take it to the public range?" They're like, "Yeah, sure." I'm like, "Okay, what?"
Hey.
I'll do it safely. So I did it off to the side, made sure backblast was clear and everything. But yeah, just seeing all the regular folks, like they're if you're not familiar with my stuff and you're kind of walking blind in it, you're probably like, what the fuck is going on? Sorry, I don't know if you're allowed to curse on this, but yeah, that was the reaction. And just walking that down the line, like carrying like 2-man carrying a big rocket launcher. It was a good time.
Old geezer just walks up behind you like, "Oh, dude, do not stand back there."
Yeah, we had to tell a few people. They were like walking toward it, like, nope, wait, we're shooting.
Oh yeah,
Give us a second.
stand back there. Like, do not be in front of this. Do not be behind it. Be away.
Yeah, as we saw with the RPG blow up, you see how dangerous black powder can be. It's
Yeah,
spicy.
I don't even want to fuck with like black powder rifles. I grew up around like one of my dad's friends was an old Dutchman, and he inevitably
Old
blew up a
Dutchman.
rifle. Yeah, old Dutchman with a shit ton of rifles, including a bunch buried around his property. He's since died, and no one knows where the rifles are, which is a damn shame because he had some spicy stuff. But or my dad might know, but he hasn't told me because he knows I would go and dig them up. But all that to say, no, black powder guns scare the shit out of me. But
Yeah.
what was that latest launcher called?
It was called
Flash?
the Spike, and what that stands for is Single Penetrator Kinetic Energy. It never really got past development, so they developed it. It worked, functioned properly, but that research would go on to the more famous design called the LOSAT. I don't know if you've seen that.
Mm.
It's the larger. They basically put them on Humvees. It was like 4 rockets on top of a Humvee, and
Mm.
they would take out a T-72 tank.
Oh
They're
shit.
just it was huge rockets. They would go. I think they went up to 6,000 feet per second, and yeah, you'd basically
Holy
take
shit.
out any main battle tank purely off kinetic energy. And there's
That's
videos. I've posted a few of them on my Instagram. But they are nasty. They no explosive, pure kinetic energy
It's
rips
like a
right through
railgun.
them. Yeah, pretty much a railgun without the big rail. Um,
hmm.
but
That's what I
yeah,
was gonna
that
ask. Was like, was that launcher effectively like the equivalent of what we now know as an anti-material rifle at the time?
well, the launchers were like the length of a Humvee, so they would put 4 of them on the top of the roof, and then you would fire it, and then it's guided onto target.
Oh,
It's
okay.
not. They made Raytheon, bless our military industrial complex. They made a compact
The greater
version
good.
for for the tow missile. So they made
Mm.
a smaller version that would be fired out of a tow, and that was one of my favorite like bigger missile versions of it with a guidance system. What I would be making is an unguided version, but they're very accurate. They're one of the most accurate rockets because they move so fast. There's less variable changes. So yeah, that was one of the things that I'm currently working on. That I'm hoping, with the success of redoing my first book, which arguably had a lot of errors in it. It was I hadn't written anything since anything worthwhile writing since high school. So
Yeah, yeah.
and even then, that's questionable. So I redid the whole book. It's a lot longer now. It's up to the standard of the other 2 books, and that's what I'm hoping to you know get funding, get people on board. There's a company that's going to be 3D printing the fins for it. They told me that I've sent them the files, so we're working toward it, and the launcher is already done. It's ready to go. We're ready to put rockets in it. So uh,
Hey.
just got to do a lot of propellant development. That's probably going to be the hardest thing, is like making a formula that burns fast enough without exploding.
Hmm.
Kind of
Is
important.
that yeah, yes. Yes. Is that something that is kind of like the formulas for the fuel? Is that a part of any of the documentation of the original, or do you have to start from zero?
Nope, it's in the patents. I'm telling you,
Oh,
people
nice.
undervalue
Nice.
them.
Whew. Yeah, damn
It's in
that.
the patents.
That's a
I
way better
spent
starting block.
well,
Yeah.
I've spent about almost a year to 2 years researching this particular weapon. I've got freedom of information requests um, uh, filed. So I'm fighting the government for them to release more unclassified information on the project. But going through Google Patents, searching up the names of the engineers, I've actually met some engineers that have worked on the project back in the 80s. I've spoken to the family of, ones that have passed away, kind of for the book. I'm doing research on it too. So I need to build up this kind of story of like how this team came together and built this. It was a one of a kind thing. No one had used kinetic energy rockets up until that point.
Mm.
So it's a pretty interesting story. behind it, and so I've done several years of research, and then I'd say a few months ago, or maybe a couple months ago, digging through old patents on propellant formulas, I finally found a formula that matches the technical data, like how much percentage of aluminum was used in the propellant. Well, this ultra fast burning propellant from the same time period, from the same rough engineers, had the formula with that same aluminum percentage, and the other percentages that were provided did match up. So I think I've nailed it. So what I
Wild.
need to do is to get that formula is actually harder than it seems. I know what it is, but to get the micron size of the AP, which is like the oxidizer, I don't want to get too technical, but it's like a component of the propellant is difficult to make. You can
Mm.
get the larger size of that component, but to get it to that very small size, which is required to make it burn so fast, is going to require some consulting and maybe even someone with an explosive license to make that for me. And then
Mm.
once it's mixed into the propellant, then it's exempt from explosive regulation. So, yeah, I'm digging through the weeds of how to do it legally while being able to do it safely too, because I don't want to
Yeah.
blow.
No, I think, like, especially with what you're doing, that is one of the most fascinating components of this. Is like, it's great to proliferate the knowledge of legal ownership of rocket launchers, but then to actually come across, address, and hope to solve the bottlenecks of actually making these things, like whether it's legal, chemical, engineering, or whatever, like telling people what the realistic limiting factors are on these devices and this technology is like crazy valuable. And it's wild that some of the solutions are just buried in patents that have been, like collecting dust for decades.
They probably haven't been opened. No one's looked at them in decades, and they're there. They're
Yeah.
just poorly worded or poorly labeled. But just for a modern application, one of the things that I want to do is take this technology and reuse it as a way for a countermeasure for UAVs. So drones are,
Mm.
I'm sure you've seen Ukraine.
Yeah.
There is a lot of that drones dropping bombs have been one of the most game changers, at least from what
Oh
I've
yeah.
seen
Oh yeah,
on the
warfare's
battlefield.
instantly changed. It's
Yeah,
just as pivotal as trenches and machine guns and gas and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
definitely. So what this rocket that I'm looking at, it was used for anti-armor and anti-air. It
Mm.
was unguided. So when manpads became more popular, this was kind of, they were like, okay, this is really low cost, but we have manpads and we have a lot of money. So
Yeah,
they went
yeah.
with the guided, but now, with a $500 drone sending like a $90,000 missile at it, the the economy of war has shifted to where
Yep.
you really need to find low cost, um, weapons, and even from a civilian standpoint, it's not going to be too long before governments use, not maybe not here, maybe in other places, but I like the idea of developing something for civilians to protect themselves when manpads are technically illegal for civilians to own. So this would be a way to, maybe an event organizer, and because they don't have explosive in them, like using kinetic energy, and I've got a few different designs, that you don't run into the risk of firing a bunch of small bombs that maybe are duds and they don't go off, and now you have the problem of unexploded ordnance.
Yeah.
And,
The
kinetic
biggest danger
energy,
is it falling back to Earth.
yeah, falling back, and then if it's forgotten about and some kid picks it up, I feel like that's going to be a big problem in the next, whenever the war ends. That's going to be a huge problem. It's like, how do we unlitter millions of bombs that didn't go off?
Oh, it's
Yeah.
gonna be
um
fucked for
so
decades. Probably the rest
yeah,
of
definitely.
easily the rest of our lives. Ukraine will
Yeah.
be fucked.
You,
Yeah,
you don't really have
definitely.
that problem with kinetic weapons, at least.
No, I mean, as long as it fires and use up its propellant payload, like the propellant charge, or if it's rocket fuel, if it burns out, the once it impacts, is done. It'll never pose a danger outside of someone tripping and falling on it, um, to future generations. And I think as a civilian weapon, or I don't really see a difference between civilian and military weapons.
Yeah.
I think we should all have own their weapons too, but it makes more sense to develop things that we can legally own, ones that are safer for the average person to dispose of or use, and that's one of the things. Like, there's so much things you solve by not having an explosive warhead. Like, if you home make a fuse and you drop it and there's no safety in the fuse to handle a drop, then you just killed yourself.
Yeah.
Whereas, like, the only problem with a kinetic energy weapon is, maybe you ignite it and it causes a fire. That's kind of like the safety hazard. So it's less severe for the average person, and I
Yeah.
think that's the legal avenue we've been left, because the floods of the last 100 years gave up machine guns and other stuff long before we were born here with this modern, I guess, attitude toward it, and it's become
Yeah.
more popular.
A modern attitude that is also quite antiquated. Antiquated is not the right word, but like it's vintage.
It was forgotten.
Yes, yeah.
It skipped a generation, I think.
It skipped a few. They pissed away rights for many generations. But one last
I
thing.
think just people are more vocal about it now.
Yeah,
And people have the
There's
means
more
to
avenues to
communicate
be
it.
vocal about it.
yeah. We all realize just how much we've been screwed with all this access to information, and all the proliferation of that knowledge people like yourself have been doing, and many of our other good friends. But one more thing I wanted to ask about the spike launcher was, what's kind of the limitation on what it could puncture potentially? Because you mentioned its bigger brother was taking out main.
From the beginning.
Hey,
But
no, it's funny. It's funny. I just warmed up to it. But is that intended for like just killing engine blocks, or can the spike launcher also like take out bigger targets like a main battle tank?
The spike. So the primary variant of it, there's two variants. One was one solid 1 pound tungsten penetrator. That was about a half an inch diameter, and it was about 10 inches long. That could penetrate, I would say, like a BMP, like armored carriers and similar vehicles. It wouldn't be able to penetrate, like a tank. I think that was it. It didn't have enough weight, and it didn't have enough length to really get through a main battle tank, at least modern one. It would get through ERA and some other, potentially, the trophy system that defeat a lot of modern RPG rounds. Is that once it detects an RPG on its way, it sends out its own explosive to take out that threat. Well, using hypervelocity, most tanks with a trophy system can't take out kinetic energy weapons like a tank round. There's been prototypes of, like, a active protection system that can take down a tank round, an APSDS, whatever. I can't remember the abbreviation, but it's like, a discarding.
Sorry, if you don't know it, our audience likely won't, unless they were tank drivers. So.
Someone there, almost dead.
Oh no, I'm sure there's a handful, but
yeah. But yeah, there's some that can defeat that. But with these hypervelocity weapons, they're just moving too fast for that protection system to work. So it has that benefit of being able to defeat many of the, let's say an enemy tank country, North Korea invaded, some hypothetical.
Yeah.
If they were using some cheap knockoff, this type of weapon would bypass that, because it's not relying on chemical explosive. It's just moving so fast that the system doesn't have enough time to react to put in countermeasures. It's like if your rocket moved so fast to hit an aircraft before the flares even launched,
Yeah.
So it's kind of like that. And then they made a different variant that used smaller flechettes, and that was used for anti-aircraft, anti-personnel. And what it would do, after the rocket motor is done burning and you're at peak velocity, it would open all this, basically release the payload. And it was like anywhere from 18 to like 200 mini flechettes made of tungsten. So they have armor penetrating capabilities. Maybe not like crazy deep, but they would fire these at Cobra helicopters, and it would just pepper them with holes, based
Oh
on
yeah.
the couple articles that I found. Yeah, and they were designed. They were going to be work in conjunction with Stinger missiles on a Humvee. So they made this vehicle called the Setter, Setter, and what it had is 6 Stinger missiles on it, and then it had 54 of these spike rockets. So for close-in helicopters, it would fire the Spike, and then for aircraft or long-range targets, it would fire the Stinger. Before that project got pushed to the side, for it went just to man pads because they were cheap, or they had a lot of money at the time, so they could
Yeah, yeah,
afford
and they didn't
a
give a
shit
shit
ton of
about.
Stingers.
Yep,
Uh,
yep. Like,
but
what
yeah.
really cements my position on the
Oh.
Raytheon board?
But I didn't answer your question though. I believe, or I think for the
You
one,
did to a degree.
yeah, the 1 pound tungsten penetrator, I think it can penetrate like 70 to 100 millimeters, which is not crazy deep compared to like an RPG-7 or explosive shape charge rounds. But for kinetic energy, and you have a very small, it's a 2-inch diameter rocket, so it's fairly small. Once you start getting into like a huge rocket, that's when you take out main battle tanks.
Yeah, so we're talking like light armor, basically.
Yeah, light armor. Like if you're looking at American vehicles, maybe like the M13, the M113 APC, MRAPs, maybe a Bradley. Um, something like that. But obviously, if you're going up to an M1 Abrams or a T-72, it's gonna bounce, or it's just gonna hit it and make a little
Yeah.
dent.
Damn. Still, that's pretty fucking impressive.
Still cool, and there's a lot of things
very
that
applicable.
aren't main battle tanks that that spicy knowledge could be good in defeating.
Yeah.
If you're in Myanmar,
Yeah. If North Korea invades, yeah.
I wonder if
Yeah.
there's anyone in Myanmar that somehow listens to this. I see them posting Foscad sometime.
So
I would love to talk to someone from Myanmar.
I have a good reporter friend. I'll leave him anonymous for now, but he spent a couple weeks in Myanmar recently. I think this year. He told me some spicy situations he got himself into. He's one of the craziest guys I know. But they do know about my stuff. Obviously, I can't give them my information because that's ITAR violations. So
Yeah, yeah.
I have not given them like, oh, look at this cool stuff.
Yeah.
I'm just aware that they know about me, and I've seen them post about me a little bit too. Whether they have access to the books, I don't know. The books wouldn't tell you how to make an explosive warhead, so it would just tell the propulsion. So I don't know how useful that is to them when they've already kind of figured it out on their own. But
Oh, are they making DIY launches like otherwise?
Yeah, some to success, and then some I've seen have gone wrong. But yeah, I've unfortunately had to seen a couple of videos of a couple, well-intentioned guys who probably should have remote tested the prototype, and they I don't know if they died, but it looked like
fuck, they should have used a launcher.
Yeah, telling you, or fold out black chair with the Velcro, or not Velcro, but padded seats. It would have gone a lot better than sending the new guy out with the experimental launcher. But they've used it to good success, and for the most part, they're making a lot of ground to where they're getting a lot of military caches. So in the last month or two, I've seen them capture like thousands, if not tens of thousands of weapons, small arms, mortars,
Hell yes.
AKs, a ton of things. So I think we're going to see them move away from improvised. I think the heyday of improvised weapons is kind of going down because of how much momentum they've got. But I'm always keeping my finger on the pulse. I'm still waiting. I would get the giggles if I saw a Fliegerfaust used in 2024. Like if they made their own
you'd be like,
version.
I wonder why they thought of that.
I have seen there was one separatist group, and it's nothing. I don't think they saw my book, but they made like a square version of a Fliegerfaust. And I saw, I made a post about it, but yeah, I was like, yep, they played Battlefield 1. Someone got him a copy, and I think it was Nigeria. It's like a separatist group in Africa. But yeah, they made a couple of them, and I saw that, but they didn't. I didn't see him test fire it, but I knew what it was. Lots of
Yeah,
tiny
yeah.
barrels with like a face shield. It was designed for like anti-air,
Hmm.
anti-air defense, basically.
With those DIY guns in Africa, I'm always like, is this just for flexing or does it actually work? Because it's
Yeah.
always, I am hoping it works because it means someone is an absolute fucking mad lad just building. Tony Stark built this in a cave out of a box of scraps.
Pretty much.
No, we were trying to keep it to around an hour and a half for you, and we're almost at an hour 50, so I think we'll start towards wrapping it up. But really appreciate having you on, man.
Yeah,
Yeah. Nah.
seriously, this is overdue. This is really
If
overdue.
long, 4 years
Yeah.
overdue.
But who's
Yeah,
counting? Who's counting?
You can count. You can count.
Yeah.
It has been my mark of shame this entire time. But before we go, is there anything else you want to share with the audience? Anything you wanna plug? We'll be putting all of your links in the description, of course. But anything
Yes.
you want to direct the audience to, or tell them otherwise?
Yeah. So we're on mainly Instagram, Twitter, or X, whatever it is now, as Wild Arms Research and Development. If you want to see me annoy boomers with 3D printed rocket launchers, I'm definitely on X doing that once a week.
Yes.
That's not what the Second Amendment's about.
And then I'm on YouTube as well. You can buy our books at Commando Store. They are now
Fuck yeah.
selling our books. They've been very helpful.
Some
And
of
I
my
also
art is in there. Buy them.
yes, yes. Thank you, Nathan. A lot,
Yep.
especially in the M202 book and the Fliegerfaust book. His artwork is awesome in there.
Thank you.
Fucking sick.
So
Hell
yeah,
yeah.
that's
One of my favorite things. You sent me one and I gave it to my dad. He gave me a really weird look, but I thought it was badass.
yeah.
We're gonna get another now. I'm here.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that. But yeah, Commando Store, they sell it, and then Amazon is like where I kind of have it as a reserve. But yeah, we're coming out with the new Panzerfaust book that should be published within the next week or two. So yeah, we're excited about that, and then hopefully the hypervelocity rocket within the next year or two. It's a
Oh,
big
yes.
project.
Oh yeah.
But yeah,
Oh yeah,
no one's done
one
it.
last thing I meant to ask on that was, like, you mentioned before we started recording, the range on that thing was like 10 kilometers, right?
Yeah,
Potentially.
so the engineer I talked to, they said they had a buffer of 16 miles. I don't think it would get that far, but I think that's like the buffer zone in case anything, out of safety. I think it has the potential to do between 5 and 10 miles. If it goes off course. That's why it's so difficult. And we were going to bring this up in the meeting, but yeah, I moved to Florida, and that's very difficult to find that much land.
Yeah.
So we looked at the option of taking a boat into the Gulf of Mexico, you know, very secluded area, and testing off a remote, barge or something, some kind of test stand out there. So I reached out to the ATF. I'm a good boy. I follow all the rules. So I go to the ATF and I'm like, okay, here's this very specific situation. Do I need a permission slip to go into federal waters? Because if you travel interstates with an NFA item, you need a permission slip, basically, a Form 20. So I'm like, hey, do I need one? If I travel into federal waters, which is not a different state, so I didn't know. And they're like, yeah, we're going to have to talk to our lawyers about that. And they came back and they're like, as long as you return in the same port that you left, you do not need a permission slip. But yeah, I'm sure their lawyers are like, what the fuck are they thinking? Like, why are they taking
Right. And say, just for argument's sake, pirates try and raid my ship, and I, as a law-abiding citizen, am trying not to let my launcher end up in the hands of a pirate.
I mean, in
And
international waters, anything goes.
Sink
that's-
that puppy.
But yeah, a lot of misconception is around that. Like, you can go into the international waters and like print a machine gun and stuff. You're actually bound by the laws of the boat that it's registered in.
Oh, that's
So
very gay.
yeah, I know. But yeah, I thought about doing. I was like, international waters. No one's gonna, But no, it's like, they'll
There
definitely
are
be
also
waiting.
rules out there for some reason.
That's
Yeah.
very gay. Who even like enforces those rules?
Pat Watson in another life,
No.
the
Yeah.
Coast Guard.
I mean, I could do all this stuff under the radar, I guess, but it would be a shame to not be able to share it, and that's what I kind of like doing. So
I agree.
Yeah,
I
it, it,
gotta
would-
I
it would
gotta do
defeat the
it.
point,
Yeah,
and if you got found out, that would be a significant amount of time in jail.
yeah. So we try to do everything by the books. I know it may be cringe or lame, but I'm very publicly out there, and I've got a family, so like I like to share and do this stuff, but to do it so publicly and be able to continue doing it, not just like a one-off, and then go to jail and then not be heard of again. I'm just following the rules, and I like to try to think that I'm also helping keep people out of jail who want to do this, that don't know where the lines are, and then whether they can make an informed decision whether they want to cross that line, whether documented or undocumented. I'm not
Yep.
anyone's dad, or I'm outside of my son. I'm no one's dad to tell them what to do.
I guess I am someone's dad.
But yeah, I'm not going to tell what people should do or is right or wrong. I want people to be safe when they're doing it, because as we've seen with someone getting blown up, that doesn't look good on us, and it's not good if someone kills himself. We don't want that. So make sure if you're doing it, don't rely off anything I'm saying. Research everything yourself. Make sure. I'm not an expert. I'm not even an engineer. I graduated as an econ major, so
That's awesome.
so
I love that.
I'm not an engineer. Don't trust everything I'm doing as like 100% fact. Figure it out for yourself. And if you like my books for the entertainment value, and it gives you inspiration to look into the idea that yes, you can own this stuff, awesome.
Man, you're a man after my own heart, and I'm sure many others, and the work you're doing would make Pierre Luti and many of his compatriots all over the world very proud. So
I agree.
really love that there's people like you pushing the envelope with this stuff, and doing learning for the people that, I mean, they can't test fire these things in basement in Europe or otherwise. So
Yeah, definitely.
well, on the topic of being a dad to someone, we do have to close out with just one thing, Jonathan. We need some
Yes.
dad advice for the people,
Dad
for the people
advice.
listening, as if the audience are your own sons and maybe like 5 daughters. There's not
Yeah.
that many.
I'd say, one personal thing that I had to learn was really learning how to be patient. I didn't have that at the start. I wasn't very patient. So, kids are gonna break shit. They're gonna make mistakes. Just learn. You gotta have patience, and just tell them, learn with them. That's what I'd say. Nothing
That's
too
good
funny.
stuff.
I don't have any good
No,
funny
no,
ones.
no, no.
But
Funny the funny stuff is great, and the serious stuff is arguably better. Like it all helps people grow, and if you file enough Form 1s, I'm sure you learn all sorts of patience.
yeah, it's gonna be interesting because I'm gonna have 3 boys soon, total, and it's gonna be like funny explaining what I do, and like how to appropriately tell people what I do for yeah.
Man, career day at school. My
Yeah.
dad builds rocket launchers. What the fuck? You're lying.
Yeah.
No,
So
that's awesome.
that'll be interesting when we get there.
Oh no, that's killer. All right, well, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Jonathan Wild of Wild Arms Research and Development, thank you so much for coming on. We'll have to do this again sometime, and we'll be plugging the book and sharing all that good stuff because we love to see this stuff proliferate.
Yes.
So thank
I
you very
really
much,
want
good
to.
sir.
I appreciate you guys having me on. I really do.
Anytime,
course.
anytime. I'm looking forward to your next.
And it won't be 4 years until the next one.
No, it's got to be a 4-year update.
4-year update. Fuck.
But
All
by
right.
then you'll have like a man pad somehow.
Yeah, I'll have all the. I'll be working like I'll buy Raytheon or something. We'll see how.
Out of the rubble. All right. Well, thank you everyone for listening. Until next time, Nathan.
Okay, bye.
I had
bye for some reason.
I also had to get it on record, Jonathan saying water. It's not just me.
I heard that. I was wondering if I was going crazy, but he did that multiple times. I'm like, oh, the mask is slipping.
Wait, say water one more time for us.
Water.
Hey. It's such a bitch for me to get water. When I have to order water at a bar and I'm a few drinks deep and my accent is really coming out, I'm fucked. I'm like, can I get some water? Yeah,
you gotta say water.
Yeah, you do a D, not a T. Americans, you guys say water.
Water, yeah.
And I will die on that hill.
Not right.
It's not right. The fucking word. It's a completely different word. Anyway, okay, bye.
Okay, bye.